Let me start by saying this is always an honor to help open the school year, and it's especially wonderful to have members of the school board here. Last year I had the privilege of being invited to do 2 school board workshops, and that is being much more widely received and welcomed because leadership matters. I hesitate to say the same thing. I'm from the State Department of Education. I'm here to help, but I'll say it anyway because I think I do have a reputation of wanting to help educators make it safe, respectful, and the best possible learning climate for every child, no matter how young. So let me tell you a little bit about what I do at the state as a way of helping inform practice, because that's what I'm about. And the best part for me in coming out is to be able to put a face with a name and hope that if any of you wish to contact me later, you will do so. I have had interactions on a number of occasions with members of this district, and they've always been very positive. So it's a pleasure to be here. I like to begin by saying school climate matters, whatever that is. I will make sure I share that with you. But I'm the lucky person at the state. I happen to be housed, we're in bureaus. That never made sense to me until I got to the state 5 years ago, but we're divided into bureaus. And when the department was reorganized 3.5 years ago after the accountability legislation that gave the State Department a lot more oversight to work with our partner districts, those districts that are in years 3, 5, 7 of failing to meet NCLB, and your nearest neighbor that is one of those 15 is Ansonia, Hartford, Bridgeport, New Haven. I could name them all. We work with them very closely, and in almost all cases they've shown amazing strides, in large part because they're focusing on the quality of the school climate. But when the department was reorganized, the work that I represent, which is school climate improvement, bullying, character education, it's all the same thing, okay, was housed with those people who are focusing on school improvement, because we believe at the State Department of Education, and we're proving it absolutely right, that the foundation of high quality academic achievement is to have a physically, emotionally, and intellectually safe and supportive and healthy school environment. And I'll say one other thing about our theory of action. This is not about the children. This is about us. This is systems work. This is work that we all need to do together to provide a message, structures, and practices that help support children. It's not about a program. It's not about a curriculum. There is wonderful stuff out there. I'm the first to be able to share with you wonderful curricula, structures, practices, but if we don't have the systems work with all of us working collaboratively, consistently together, none of those other things make that much difference. So, let me tell you probably the most interesting thing to you about what I do. I am the lucky person who receives the bullying complaints. Last year, which I will close out on August 31st, was a banner year. I've been tracking these. Now they're anecdotal, and they're anecdotal because the only kind of bullying complaint that is required to be sent to the state is through our database, which many of you may know as the ED-166. It is our database regarding suspensions and expulsions. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that with you before my time is over today. But the only time when a bullying case would come to us is if that bullying case resulted in suspension and expulsion. Other than that, we do not collect any data officially. We haven't had a chance. All of the financial constraints, everything that's been going down in the last couple of years has sort of eclipsed providing districts with a process for doing so. But what I find, because I hear from parents in crisis, almost exclusively from family members, parents, guardians, advocates, grandmothers, aunts, uncles, of students who have been the targets of bullying behavior. This year, I'm very pleased to share, and I think this is a huge step forward, about 10% of the calls I'm getting are from you, educators, who are calling to say, I've got a difficult case, can we talk practice? And when those cases go on and I try to problem solve, for those of you who understand the SRBI framework, the conversations I have are always Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions, okay? But the school climate work I do is not only universal practice, it's really the foundation. It's even more basic than thinking about it in terms of universal practices. But I interrupt myself. This year, I have received over 225 cases, not calls, they go on and on and on, cases about bullying allegations. And last year when I closed out the year, it was only 174, and the year before that, 167. So I'm about 50 ahead of where I was last year. Why? Well, I think a couple things are going on. One thing has to do with the Phoebe Prince suicide in South Hadley, Massachusetts. My caseload spiked after that case. Now, you should understand that student suicides based on or due to inappropriate, hurtful, cruel student treatment are not uncommon. They are, unfortunately, all too common. The difference with the Phoebe Prince case and why it has gone viral, as they say now, is that for the first time, students were arrested. And that's what's different. The second reason why I think that my caseload has spiked is because of the targeted focus that this state, this wonderful state of Connecticut, is giving to school climate improvement. And very simply, school climate improvement, school climate is about the quality of the relationships in schools, how people treat one another, how peers treat each other, how we interact with students, and very importantly, how we interact with colleagues. All of that describes the quality of the school climate. When we talk about improving school climate, that's what we're improving, relationships. So I've heard from, in 5 years, 815 approximately of these bullying allegations. And what I've learned, I think, helps you, or can help all of you. The first thing is that these allegations are equal opportunity. They're not big district, small district, rich district, poor district, inner city, rural, cut across the dergs, cut across every kind of demographic cutting of the pie that you wish. Now, what about the things that are being alleged? Are there any trends there? Well, let me share with you one thing that I think we might believe, that a lot of this is about the cyber arena, and that has exponentially increased. It hasn't. And I'd like to suggest that yes, when something happens, whether it's through cell phones or Facebook postings or anything of that variety, because it can go so public, immediately we tend to think that this is the new way that kids hurt others. They do it, but not in any kind of overwhelming preponderance. Most of the allegations have to do with face-to-face treatment, okay? If you think about the desperate need for kids to belong and to be with their friends, when you welcome them back on Monday, why are they coming? To see their friends. Let's not kid ourselves. We have to be really honest, and that's a really important part of what they do, and in fact, that's the hook. So if they can't be in an environment that's a destination, a social destination, all bets are off. So, I've heard from parents with children who are highly allergic to peanuts who are being taunted with peanut butter sandwiches or Butterfingers. I've heard from parents or guardians of girls whose only accusation is another girl is staring her down. I have heard of all-out assaults, exclusion, instances where kids are, the police have been involved, and everything in between. I keep thinking I've heard it all, and then I get another case. So there is absolutely no trends to the kinds of things that are happening. Now, what about grade level? I've heard from parents, and when I say parents, guardians, advocates, and so on, parents with children as young as 3 and 4, and then I've heard all the way into the post-secondary setting. I even once heard from somebody who got my name complaining about treatment in a nursing home. But I routinely hear about allegations of educators who are treating children inappropriately and educators and administrators who do not have great relationships. So it is all the spectrum that is affected by this. Now, every single year, there is always a little hump increase in middle school, but not so much that this is a middle school problem. And the reasons for this little increase in middle school are absolutely obvious. One is developmental changes. You've got some children who look like they should be seniors in high school, and you've got others who look like they are 8. This creates real differences in trying to wind your way around the social fabric. You've also got children who are coming from different middle schools, coming together and not knowing each other. So all of these things coalesce, and in addition, you've got wonderfully competent and caring elementary school classes, self-contained, and we very often throw kids into a middle school environment where the focus is now on academics, and we aren't meeting their social needs nearly as well. So we need to think about transitions. Middle school children, and the older I get, the more I realize this, are little children. They're young, and they need our support just as much as they did when they were in elementary school. All right, so those are the things where there isn't very much trend. But there are 2 things that jump out that are huge trends and matter greatly in practice. One thing is that statewide, and this is true nationally, 10 to 12% of children are identified as having special needs. They may have an individualized education plan, an IEP. They may have a 504 plan, but they are identified or in the process of being identified as having special needs. So if my caseload was reflective of that statistic, you would think that out of 100 cases, 12, 10 would be involved or would involve kids with special needs. My caseload runs 3 to 6 times that rate. In other words, out of 100 cases, anywhere from about 30 to 60, 65 kids have official special needs. Children who are different get targeted, and children who are different target one another because they don't know how to interact. And it's not just children with special needs. It's any child who is different. A child who dresses oddly, a gender non-conforming child, a boy who may be a little more caring, a little more interested in playing with the girls and not interested in sports. These are kids who are at risk for being singled out and hurt by their peers. And it's not up to them to change who they are. It's up to us to support them and to watch out. Yes, they need to learn better social skills. That's a piece of it. But we need to watch out to make sure that they are equally welcomed safe, and protected from harm. Physical harm, but more importantly, emotional and intellectual harm. And the second trend for all of these cases has to do with what the family is perceiving going on versus what's happening in the school. Now, the law that we all work within says that the State Department of Education, and I'm that person who represents this arena and this particular legislation, that we have no authority whatsoever to intervene, to monitor, to investigate. We have no role. I'm purely a resource. In fact, there's never any time, under any circumstances, anything would be triggered for me to come out to a school. I am always at a school by invitation. Always. So when I listen to the family, in almost all cases, I turn around and place a courtesy call to the building administrator. And I let that building administrator know that I've heard from a parent, and I don't hide anything from parents. They know I'm calling. They're usually quite happy for me to intervene. And what I find is what the family is telling me is going on, what their perception is in a different universe from what is objectively happening and what is going on in the school. The bulk of the work to improve school climate, improve the quality of the relationships, and diminish this bullying behavior, which I want to talk about very briefly, rests in communication. I urge you all, as you welcome your students and their families back to school, that you encourage them over and over and over to tell you what's happening, the good things as well as those things that may be hurtful. The first time, don't wait, because when they wait, it explodes. And you are only as good as the information you have. So you want to know the first time. Now let me interject something else that I've learned, and I travel all over giving this message, and it's a systems message about common language and where we all need to go, not only as schools, but as a district, and that is to think about the concept of bullying. Bullying, bully, bullier, bullying behaviors, any other phrase that has that word in it, I like to think of it as the new four-letter word, is one of, if not the most toxic concepts, negatively charged and alarmist, that wanders within our school buildings and our communities each and every day. No parent says that their child's a bully. No child will honestly say they're a bully. And no school in this state or any other willingly says, yeah, we got a lot of bullying here. The only constituency that wants that label is the target's family, to have validation that what happened to their child is wrong. It's a lose-lose situation. Yes, I know that we have an anti-bullying law. We have to abide by it. We have to make sure that our lawyers have written our policies so that they are in line and we are in compliance. But 44 states have an anti-bullying law, and there are 44 different definitions. There is no one definition of bullying. We keep changing ours because we don't get ahead of the curve. Why have 44 states legislated in this way? Well, I can tell you quite simply. It's because they're trying very hard to dictate that we have an obligation to create safe environments for children, physically, emotionally, and intellectually. But what happens is instead of legislating that, we legislate that whenever we verify a bullying case, we intervene, we discipline, we suspend, we do something of that sort. And we're not making a difference. So as you communicate, and I think that list that Steve just read about what you can expect from us, another thing that I would encourage you to talk about with your students is what will it take to create a safe environment for all of us. The only thing we can talk about that experts agree on in terms of bullying is that it's about abuse of power. That's it. But beyond that, there is no commonality. You should know last February, because we did have a legal obligation, the State Department, to report to the legislature how we're doing with bullying and bullying policies. The commissioner issued a report, and one of the recommendations was that we change our law from being an anti-bullying law to having a Connecticut Safe School Climate Act. Wow, would that make a difference? We would be looking at this through a different lens. So if we can't use the word bully, bullying, bullier, and if any of you who have spent hours and hours making your classrooms look gorgeous in preparation for children arriving, and you happen to have a sign that says, "We're a bully-free zone," or you have some kind of a sign with the line through it and says, "Bully," take it down. Communicate to your children, to your families, that yes, we have a bullying law and we're in compliance, but Derby holds ourselves to a higher standard. We believe that every child should be safe. That's where we're going. It's not just to diminish bullying, it's about to create safe places. Okay, I want to share, let me ask one other comment before I go to the couple other things I want to mention before my time's up. And that is that if you cannot use the word bully, bullying, bullier, what are you to use? I would recommend mean, hurtful, cruel, if you think that mean or hurtful are not okay, not high-end enough, but don't use the word bully. There is not a child who doesn't own up to the fact that, yeah, I can be mean. Parents will willingly say, yeah, my kid's mean from time to time. It's a very different conversation, whether it's as a teacher to a family or administrator to a family, to call home and say, your child's been involved in some bullying. Not my child. But if you say, your child's been involved in some ongoing mean-spirited behavior, you have a conversation. Try it. Trust me. Okay. Really what we're talking about, not only with bullying, but with all kinds of behaviors, is making sure that children are in class to learn. This is what it's all about. And whether they choose to stay home, which they do because of how they're treated, or we send them out of the classroom because of their behavior, they are not in class to learn. And we have now a law, another law, about suspension. And it, in essence, says too many suspensions going on, except in extreme cases of violence or danger, you're going to keep those kids in school. Now, let me just suggest to you that this didn't just happen to schools. The legislature isn't just doing something to schools. But if we look at all of the suspensions that have happened in the last decade plus, over 70, I'm not saying 17, 70% every year of these suspensions are for non-dangerous behaviors. Tardiness, dress code violations, insubordination, profanity. There's a lot of reasons why kids ought not be in school, but from my perspective, these aren't those. These are kids who may have had inappropriate role models, may have had all kinds of things going on that contribute to their swearing, to their being tardy, and if we could manage just the 70% of non-dangerous behaviors, we would turn this thing around overnight. I will suggest that most suspensions not expulsions, suspensions are, and office referrals and other kinds of detentions are given by a minority of educators who target the majority of students. Most of us hardly, if ever, will send a child down to the office, suspend, and so on. But there are always a handful of adults within the building who are responsible for the lion's share of kids being in trouble. This is an adult problem. This is not a child problem. The last thing I'd like to say today, and kind of leave you with a positive note, is I think in schools we have a set of non-negotiables that are really quite odd. When we think about what are our bottom line that the students must adhere to, it tends to be the rules that are easy for us to recognize. Whether they have their ID tags, whether they're wearing the hat or their cell phone is out, or whether they're tardy and so on. Now, I'm not in any way suggesting that those aren't absolutely appropriate and necessary boundaries. But if those are our non-negotiables, we interact with students in a way that may be somewhat negative. Take off your hat, you're tardy again, and so on. There has been some very powerful research, and I'd be happy to share it with anybody. It's on our website. I have it. It's in PDF documents about something that we now call as school connectedness. The military originally funded this very impressive and ongoing and validated research about student mobility. What was happening to students who were constantly pulled out of communities and plopped into other communities and had to do this over and over and over. And what they found, that although kids are pretty resilient, at about 6 to 7 of these life moves, kids on average tank in terms of their academic achievement and their life chances and health risk behaviors and so on. And what they did find out is that there are 5 very, very, very simple measures that determine and make or break whether a child's going to be successful for school. And I'll tell you, this is true for families as well. So let me tell you what these 5 things are, and if these could be our new non-negotiables, if we were always thinking about these 5 things, how we interact to deal with the boundaries would change. Here we go. Close to people at school. And it's not just peers. Every student in this district and every other should perceive that there is a go-to adult, that there's an advocate, is there for them, that cares for them. Close to people at school. Second thing, happy to be at school. Isn't that novel? Now, happy schools are not always high-performing schools, but high-performing schools are very often happy schools. So being happy to be at school. The third thing is feeling as though you're a part of the school, part of a school community. How do you do that? In all kinds of ways. By being part of a discussion about what rights and responsibilities are, by being part of discussion to create a social contract in a classroom school-wide that says how we'll be together, through service learning, through activities and projects. There are myriad ways that you can feel a part of the school, but it's important to feel part of the school community. The fourth thing is feeling as though adults in school treat students and families fairly. And treating you fairly doesn't always mean the same treatment. Different people need different kinds of interactions and so on. Consequences. So being treated fairly. Very often for children as well as families, fairness and listening are equated. If you've listened, they think you're fair. And the last thing is feeling safe. Physically, emotionally, and intellectually. This is what makes or breaks kids' connectedness to school. Kids who are highly connected to school, according to these 5 measures, soar academically. They do not get involved in risky sexual behaviors. They do not abuse substances. They do not experience social distress, emotional distress, and attempts on suicide. And they do not engage in violent or deviant behavior. And violent or deviant behavior is not just a high-end weapon kind of thing. It is, I don't want to sit with you. So if we think about, as a system, focusing on what do I have to do to foster connectedness, we will do wonderful things for kids.